Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good Tuesday evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 9th of May, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. You can do that easily by finding your forecast over the phone at 1-800-472-0391. Find us online at weather.gov/Alaska, and once you click once on that map, it'll be help you be taken to your local weather forecast office, whether that's Fairbanks, Juneau, or Anchorage, serving your part of Alaska. And from there on out, you'll get a lot more localized information, including radar and satellite and weather observations for your community and village. You can always send us an email. If you can't find what you're looking for, we really do like to help you narrow in on where you need to be. nws.ar.tvweather@noaa.gov will reach the entire TV desk team, or if you just use david.snider like you see here on the screen, you'll be able to get to me personally, and I'll be happy to help you as well. As far as weather concerns go around Alaska, we don't have any watches, warnings, or advisories. There are no flooding concerns, but it is breakup season. The crew has returned from the Kuskokwim. We're still watching areas out around Pilot Station, out around the Yukon. But as far as the Kuskokwim goes, things are pretty well unfrozen in most areas. They're mostly open there above areas around, looks like from McGrath and then southward towards some of the southern tributaries. Things are looking okay there. But once you get up around Circle, you start to see some changes in the upper Yukon and the upper Tanana Valley as well. Some open conditions there above Circle, but most of the Yukon right now is still mostly ice, it looks like, although we have seen some motion around the Eagle region in the last couple of days. Above Tanana, things are fairly open there, and above Bettles on the Koyukuk, things are at least some open, but everything below that still seems to be frozen up and jumbled up. So between Holy Cross and Pilot Station, though, conditions are, I guess, mushing out a little bit there. Some open conditions there, but then still frozen out toward the Bering Sea coast as it stands now. This is a look at the breakup map for Tuesday. If you want to see conditions or any other predictions as well as river notes from people in your community, you can do that. Simply go to weather.gov/APRFC. That's short for Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center. And you can actually click on each one of these dots here and get some of the information as well as average dates of breakup. It's a really helpful website. It's improved a great deal since you looked at it last year. So a lot of very useful information, climate information, as well as actual conditions that are being reported from people in your community. So really like the map, and hopefully you'll find a similar experience when you go there. Here's a look at fire danger now. The other side of this is we're in the very driest part of the year, and so for April and now well into May, conditions are fairly dry for south central and southwestern Alaska. We have seen some showers and thunderstorms today. Let me roll back the thunderstorms just a little bit. There's potential for a thunderstorm. We've only seen a lot of widespread showers across the interior, so maybe a strike this evening, but I hadn't seen that just yet. Across the eastern Alaska range, there's certainly drier conditions as you get up and out of the Richardson Highway region and into places like Golcana and the Copper River Basin. So we're going to list that as just barely high, not quite. And that certainly isn't a very widespread fire danger across the region, but the conditions are certainly ripe to get worse as we go ahead in the next several weeks, where conditions are warming up, the air is remaining dry, and not any sizable precipitation shift anywhere around here. So that's where we are. Anytime you want to check this out, head on over to our friends at fire.ak.blm.gov. Here's a look at the satellite picture now. This is the infrared satellite picture, the one measured by the thermometer. We're looking for cool cloud tops, and that's where the computer draws in clouds, and it usually does a pretty good job. In the wintertime, of course, we usually see some big blobs of cold air that just never leave because a lot of Alaska is fairly cold, and you can see some of that residual cold up across the North Slope, but that's because it's really cold there and temperatures are in the 20s and 30s, where we've seen some snow again today across the North Slope. The brighter white clouds clue us in on that region, and that would be right here around Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse. So if you've seen snow, satellite doesn't lie very much. Here's a look at the central and western part of the chain, and the next weather maker is trying to work its way into the Western Bering Sea. That low pressure system will continue to drop for the next couple days. In the meantime, in the Eastern Gulf, a pretty ragged system here, just barely making it into your picture here across the Gulf Coast. You can see the clouds breaking up as they move eastward into a very dry situation. In fact, dry enough tonight that southeast is looking at a generally clear sky, and that probably means a decent opportunity for some fog in the morning. So if fog will slow you down in the morning, whether that's by plane or by boat, take that into consideration there. You might see some local poor visibility conditions in your region. Here's the visible satellite picture, and boy do I love this because this lies even less. Did you see that blossoming right here? Watch this again in just a minute when we start up the loop. This is all daytime heating, blowing clouds up from the Arctic Village region all the way down into southwestern Alaska, where temperatures today around Koliganek were about 64 degrees, one of the warmest temperatures in the state. Across the west coast, the YK Delta, well, no doubt things are still trying to mush out there across the Yukon. Look at all that sunshine from Bristol Bay to the YK Delta and into Norton Sound. Once you get into the Seward Peninsula, Nome, up towards Shishmaref, you got a lot of low clouds there. In fact, it looks like this is certainly ice right here across parts of the southern Kotzebue Sound region, but conditions sure are breaking up, and we'll take a look at the ice map here in just a little bit. As you get across the interior, again, watch these clouds bubble up one more time in the heat of the day. Here we go. There's that line right there. Look at that. That upper level disturbance that's working through helps to lift the atmosphere up on top of the daytime heating that already wants to do that like a hot air balloon. So the atmosphere is pretty fun to watch when you look at the visible satellite picture. And all these tiny dots out here are, of course, are cumulus clouds, a fair weather cumulus, maybe some showers or even a brief thunderstorm possible in the western parts of the Yukon. As we go ahead in the next couple of weeks, that will become a lot more likely. In the meantime, today, low pressure, thanks to the heat of the day, forming across the eastern interior and the Tanana Valley. 1,010 millibars there, and nothing terribly strong, but enough to inspire more clouds. And showers and, once again, possibly a thunderstorm could develop this afternoon or this evening, but maybe a better chance tomorrow, and especially across the Copper River Basin as well. For southeast, drier conditions across the eastern Gulf. There's our low pressure system we were talking about, 1,004 millibars there. And a low way out west across the North Pacific right now at 991 millibars. Fog in Shemya, but really that's about the only sign that it's coming in. The winds will start to move around a little bit more out in the west. High pressure sitting south of the Bering Strait, 1,022 millibars, and low pressure across the Arctic coast, helping to create just a little bit of snow up across the North Slope. By tonight, that wave will continue working its way eastward. With that, it may create a few more snow showers across the higher terrain, generally north of the Brooks Range summit. South of that wave we're looking at could keep some showers going through the evening hours. But at this point in the season, a lot of those showers are not only not going to be very tall, which is good for aviation, but because they're not tall, because they're not terribly strong, they're going to fall apart just as fast. So up and down we go. We call that, you could call it pulse convection, I guess, if you wanted to. Popcorn kind of cumulus or showers. Light showers across the eastern Gulf. Behind that, pretty ragged cloud cover. Watch for some fog again in the morning for the central and southern parts of southeast. And anywhere that you see a clear sky now, pretty good chance you're going to have fog in the morning. And across the west, 997 millibar low there south of Shemya, with the triple point and the occlusion falling apart as we head into tonight. That continues, kind of reforms here across the western chain near Kisk at 990 millibars. Warmer air down to the south will lift northward, and that's going to encourage a little bit more of a southerly flow across the Bering Sea as we get into Wednesday. High pressure is still really, well, mostly in charge of the west. You can see it's got a firm grip across places like Nome and Wales and St. Lawrence Island. But we've got some undercutting disturbances here across the YK Delta, up around Ambler, Bettles, and because of that low pressure system across the eastern interior, there may be that opportunity for a few thunderstorms in the vicinity, and that would generally be from about Fairbanks eastward and southward into the northern Copper River Basin. South of that, just showers for the Kenai Peninsula and the higher terrain. That would be a little more likely there, but most of the Cook Inlet region looks fairly dry. You'll see some mountain showers probably tomorrow. Kenai and the Kodiak Island region generally dry. Southeast, mostly dry. You'll see a few more clouds in the afternoon. High pressures across the Arctic coast, keeping low clouds and fog possible there. That shifts a little bit more to the east, so the best chance of fog would be from about Prudhoe Bay and eastward for your Thursday. Low pressure wraps up on itself once again across the southern Bering. And look, as that happens, the pressure deepens in that low pressure center, 986 millibars there. But we stretch our occlusion now all the way from the central and southern Bering out toward the North Pacific. And it's trying to cut through this ridge of high pressure that right now doesn't look like it's going to budge very much. So chances are This will start to fall apart as we get into Friday. Watch for some isolated showers, maybe a thunderstorm again on Thursday, generally in the central and eastern interior and south across the Alaska Range. Most of south central, southwestern Alaska, northwestern Alaska, and the Seward Peninsula look to be dry. And so does southeast. Watch for some clouds floating by. But right now you look like you're in a fairly dry pattern as well. That's a look at your surface weather. Today's temperatures were in the 40s and 50s across southeast. A mild day around the capital city there. Prince William Sound picked up about 0.2 of an inch around Cordova and Valdez. A little bit of rain there in Seward. It was 51, 53 in Homer, 47 around Kenai around mid-afternoon, and into the upper 50s for the Anchorage region. The Parks Highway back in the mid to upper 50s today. Fairbanks made it to the lower 60s this afternoon. Eagle was 56, 61 up around Fort Yukon, 25 for AKwx Pass, 20s and 30s for the eastern and central Beaufort Seacoast. Kaktovik was 32, Barrow 24, Wainwright a colder 19, 20s and 30s for Kotzebue Sound, Shishmaref 28, 10 degrees warmer across the peninsula in Nome at 38 degrees, 29 for St. Lawrence Island. McGrath had 57, 54 in Bethel, 45 for Nunivak Island. Lake Iliamna back in the mid-50s. Bristol Bay saw temps in the upper 50s today, 40s and 50s for the Alaska Peninsula. Kodiak Island close to 50 this afternoon, close to 40 in the Pribilofs, 45 for Unalaska and Dutch Harbor, and 30s and 40s for the central and western chain. Overnight lows will stay fairly mild all the way from the upper Yukon all the way through the upper Kuskokwim and out toward Bristol Bay and southwest. 30s and 40s for those regions, 40 in Kodiak. Upper 30s to low 40s for southeast, again with a clear sky and some fog. South central closer to the upper 30s and 40-degree range once again. And north of the Brooks Range, teens and 20s. It looks like the Seward Peninsula and Nome, upper 20s for you, and the chain also close to 40 degrees. High temps tomorrow will skyrocket back into the upper 50s and low 60s for the Middle Tanana Valley and Fairbanks, North Pole, Fort Greely, all the way down toward Healy and Denali. It looks like a beautiful day there. Upper 50s and lower 60s southwest, 50 around Kodiak, mid 50s again for Kenai, Prince William Sound, and south central, southeast in the upper 50s to low 60s. The north slope still colder, highs in the upper 20s to about 34 degrees around AKwx Pass, Kotzebue Sound in the mid to upper 30s. St. Paul 41, and most of our friends fishing out in the Alaska Peninsula closer to the lower 50s there, like False Pass and Coal Bay. Unalaska and Dutch Harbor 46. IFR conditions will start around Nikolsky and out toward Adak, around that area of low pressure moving eastward and north of St. Matthew, but not quite to St. Lawrence Island tomorrow. And MVFR conditions for a large part of the north slope. Watch for fog across southeast for some visibility restrictions there. That should clear up. Watch for convection across the central and eastern interior tomorrow afternoon. MVFR lingers across the north slope, and IFR increases all the way through the Pribilofs tomorrow afternoon and for the central and some parts of the eastern chain, but not quite to Nikolsky in the afternoon, so there is hope. AKwx Pass, VFR conditions by the afternoon. Look for improvement for Adigan Pass as well, VFR by the afternoon. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass look pretty good through the day. Rainy Pass should see improvements for your Wednesday. Windy Pass looks like we'll see VFR by the afternoon. An MVFR start there for Isabel as well, VFR by the afternoon. MVFR may hold for a large part of the day around Mentasta Pass. Most of that's going to be due to showers passing through the region. Tenita Pass, MVFR conditions, but improvement expected by the afternoon. Portage Pass looks pretty good most of the day. And Chilkoot and White Pass, watch for some morning low clouds. Otherwise, things should be a-okay by the afternoon. As far as the cold air aloft goes, it's really limited north of the Brooks Range and into Norton Sound. Here's a surface freezing line painted in white. Other than that, it looks like a big bowl of spaghetti flipped over here. Anywhere from 2 to 4, 6,000 foot levels across the Bering Sea. Here's an 8,000 foot level east of Atka and west toward Nikolsky. And then there's still some cold air lurking across the Gulf as those waves of low pressure kind of move into the Gulf and die at this point. Levels over south central, right around 4,000 feet if you're moving into Lake Hood tomorrow. Icing potential below 4 to about 7,000 feet. Across the eastern interior. Most of this is going to be light to isolated moderate. We had a couple reports of isolated moderate today, I believe. Across the central and eastern chain above 8,000 feet. Southeast is looking pretty good. There's a couple places if you're moving all the way across the Gulf, that'll be above 6,000 feet there. The jet stream shows our upside down. This kind of looks like a crazy octopus, or the omega shape here. Here's the octopus head and here's the arms. Low pressure is working its way out of the Kamchatka Peninsula and into the North Pacific. And once we get into this type of pattern, it is a blocking pattern, and low pressure focuses on either side, and usually it dies out and the whole pattern does not move very quickly at all. What does that mean? What you see is what you get, at least for the near term, until this can be short-circuited some way and allow the pattern to move along a little bit more. But a dry northerly flow for a large part of Alaska. At 9,000 feet, high pressure slowing the winds down across the interior as it's anchored out across the Bering Strait right now. Weak low pressure across the south and eastern parts of the Gulf, bringing winds coming offshore from southeastern Alaska, light winds across south central, and there's our southerly flow digging back into the central and eastern chain, 30 to 50 knots there at 9,000 feet, a little bit less, 25 to 30 across most of the central and eastern chain at 3,000 out west. Towards Shemya, it's a little bit stronger, but light winds across the interior, 5 to 10 knots, about all we need there at 3,000. So turbulence, not much. Southeast, south central, the interior, the north, and the west looking pretty good. A little bit of chop around the eastern chain. Around the Pribilofs in the west, maybe just a skosh of occasional moderate out around Shemya. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back with the rest of your marine weather here in just a few minutes.
There are many different types of aircraft being used in Southeast Alaska. Air commerce here is utilized the way the rest of the U.S. uses taxis, buses, and trucks. Helicopters and float planes are the most widely used aircraft. However, fixed gear and retractable gear aircraft are found in most Alaskan fleets. Be sure to monitor a local radio frequency at all times and make frequent position reports. It's important that you file a flight plan and stick to it. Then, if an emergency landing is imminent, the radio is already set to make a report. Be aware that several large air carriers land at Ketchikan, Wrangell, Petersburg, Sitka, Gustavus, and Juneau. Having good communication and keeping vigilant can save you from becoming a near mid-air collision or NMAC statistic. The vortices that are generated by these large aircraft can cause a smaller aircraft to be forced onto the runway during landing or departure. To avoid wake turbulence, try landing beyond the larger aircraft's touchdown point and take off prior to their rotation point. It's best to wait the recommended 3 to 5 minutes for wake turbulence abatement. If the tower does not make a recommendation for a wait for wake turbulence abatement, the pilot should make the request. While on cross-country flights, plot your course on the chart. Keep a close track of where you are at all times. It's easy for one inlet or bay to look very much like another. Pilotage is a skill that is alive and well in Alaska. Navigation aids are few and far between, and a GPS should only be used as a backup for the chart and pilotage. As a reminder, there are no GPS instrument approaches in Southeast Alaska at this time. Remember that alternating or flashing landing lights are unique to Alaska's aviation community. They are used to enhance visibility of aircraft in flight. A word of caution: remain within gliding distance of the shore when at all possible. The water is very cold, even in the summer. In the event of a forced water landing, the chances of survival are very slim due to hypothermia. Weather changes rapidly, and often the changes are not forecast. Making a 180-degree turn and a precautionary landing at the first available landing area, even a beach, can save your life. Pilots often wait out bad weather at an outlying strip or beach. You should always be prepared to lay over until better weather arrives. If the wind is blowing, chances are the skies will be clear, but the ride bumpy. Wind can be seen on the water in the form of whitecaps. This indicates that the water could be too rough for landing a float plane. It's wise to call flight service prior to departure to see what the surface conditions will be at your intended airport destination. As the saying goes, if you don't like the weather here, just wait 10 minutes. The 60 nautical mile trip to Haines from Juneau is fairly straightforward. One noteworthy item is the lack of beaches in the area. The slope of the mountains continues to the bottom of the canal, causing small rocky outcroppings in most areas. Flying up the Lynn Canal to Chilkat Inlet is the preferred route to Haines. The Lynn Canal has several prominent reporting points that are used by the local operators and private pilots. After departing Juneau to the west, you should fly to the right side of Lynn Canal, close to the land mass. Utilize the hemispheric rule for determining your flying altitude. The first prominent departure reporting points are Lena Point, T Harbor, Eagle Beach, and Benjamin Island.
It could be that nice and southeast tomorrow. True story. Here's a look at today's sea ice edge, and the ice edge is getting smaller and smaller and more ragged as we go. You'll notice that the ice around St. Lawrence Island is diminishing very quickly, and hunting conditions could be changing in a kind of a dangerous kind of way in the next couple days there. So hunters out on Gamble and Savunga, keep watch on the ice conditions out there. If you're planning to venture out, things are changing. And hate to have you run into trouble. So make sure you check on weather.gov/Anchorage/ice for the latest conditions there. In Norton Sound, a lot of ice diminishing there as well. Still less than 80% concentration for most of the sound, but there's still some shore fast, it looks like, between Amonach and Unalakleet, and from Nome up toward Wales, as well as the south side of the Kotzebue Sound region with more opening water there up around Point Hope and out west of Kivalina. So again, watch for changing conditions in your area. Here's a look at southeast. Light winds coming down the inner channels. Northerlies about 15 knots, 3-foot seas on the inside. Offshore winds blowing thanks to that 3,000 and 9,000 foot wind we saw just a little while ago. Northeasterlies also remain light, about 15 knots there with 6 to 7 foot seas across the outer coast for your Thursday. Conditions should be fairly nice as we, we're going to need a little bit of advancing help, it looks like, for the next map, if we would. But generally, outside conditions there will be generally light with a fairly light breeze across the outer coast there. And Sean, if you can hear the sound of my voice, if you could bump the maps there. There we go. Let's see if we can move on to the next one. But winds are fairly light across the outer coast for the next couple days. Northerlies across the inside waters should be fairly light. And once we get into south central, you'll also see that high pressure across the north part of the Arctic, and that upper level pattern will keep winds fairly light across south central as well. We're looking at more of a down inlet flow from the north and east. Seas will remain fairly small for the next couple days. The only place that we're really expecting any sizable change would be out across the central and the western Aleutians, and in those places winds are going to start to come up across Kiska and Shemya, where we expect to see seas coming up to about 8 to 9 feet across the central and western chain as the winds come in more from the south and then gradually flip around to more of a west and northwesterly flow gradually as that low pressure system works its way east and north. Now it is going to slow down and kind of fizzle out a little bit, so you'll be under those changing wind conditions across the Aleutians for about Wednesday, Thursday, and into Friday as that front moves across. But remember, it will be dying, so those winds should kind of ease out as they move into places like Nikolsky and Unalaska and Dutch Harbor. For the west coast, high pressure is still your friend, and that will keep winds fairly light across the west, and the sky generally dry and clear. But again, that does bring some heat and changing ice conditions there for our friends out around St. Lawrence Island. St. Paul and St. George are also watching for some changing weather as that front gets closer to you. Across the Bering Strait region, we would expect to see generally small seas, but winds are going to come up a little bit more north of the Bering Strait. And watch for changing wind conditions across the north slope as winds pretty much reverse course around the central and eastern Beaufort seacoast. Once we get into Thursday and into Friday, as high pressure is on the move eastward, that's going to give you a little bit stronger easterly flow, moving all the way from Kaktovik to Prudhoe Bay and Deadhorse and out toward Barrow and down into the Chukchi coast. Let's recap your weather across South Central, and we apologize, the maps seem to be in stuck position at this point, but imagine, if you will, you've already seen the surface charts with me, and you can always watch those at weather.gov/Anchorage/TV, and they're there. Well, we're going to walk through them here, starting with tonight. Generally clear conditions across southeast, and that means a chance for fog in the morning. So if you're an aviator or you've got a tricky spot to get through with the boat tomorrow morning, plan on at least a little bit of fog in the inner channels there as the sky is clear, and that means a decent chance for poor visibility in some places tomorrow. It should burn off quickly. For South Central, generally dry conditions around the Copper River Basin. We expect to see a better chance for some showers, maybe an isolated storm tonight or into tomorrow. But again, that should end very quickly in the evening hours. For the interior, showers will continue there. There's also room for an isolated thunderstorm. It will be very brief if it does form, in fact. Out across the west, dry conditions there as clouds continue to stay away from most of the west coast. You'll see more clouds across the Aleutians and across the central and western chain with that incoming Pacific weather maker there. Pressure will continue to drop across the North Pacific in the next few days. Up north, cold temperatures there. It looks like 20s for most of the north slope, and that'll keep some pockets of light snow in your region. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather. See you tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.